All right, guys. So I am happy to be joined by friend of the show, Kyle Kalinsky of the channel Secular Talk, who I'm sure pretty much everybody on my channel is aware of. And he's going to be educating us on sort of this merger of the Gulf world and also the Saudi Arabian regime, which is something I talk about a lot on this channel. But I know absolutely nothing about the Gulf world. So Kyle is going to tie these two together with us because we just got the massive news that the PGA Tour is now going to be merging with the Live Golf Tour, which is obviously backed by the Saudi government, and it's causing a whole bunch of different scandals surrounding it. So Kyle, welcome to the channel. If you want to just give us sort of the background of what we're talking about here, what the Live Golf Tournament or the Live Golf Tour was intended to be at its founding, and how we ended up at this point.
So first of all, let me just say a quick thank you to you because you filled in for me on my channel the other when I was on my honeymoon, and I deeply appreciate it. I think you did a phenomenal job. I don't think it's easy to step into somebody else's shoes and sort of fill that role, but the audience loved the job that you did. So thank you very much to you for filling in for me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for hosting me.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. All right, so what just happened is a huge deal, not just for the golf world, but also in a political sense. In the political world, this is a giant deal. So effectively what happened here, I don't think this is hyperbole. I don't think this is an overstatement. Saudi Arabia just effectively bought the entire sport of professional golf. That's what just happened. Now, golf was already viewed as sort of this, elitist sport. Some people don't even call it a sport. They call it a game, but it's viewed as very elitist. People play until they're 90 years old and old rich guys or whatever. And now not only is it viewed as elitist, it's also going to be viewed as basically funded with blood money from a genocidal regime, because that's true, because that is what we're looking at here.
Right.
Now, the PGA Tour originally was making a big deal about the moral angle. They were making, an argument from the moral angle of Saudi Arabia. You never have to apologize for playing on the PGA Tour. Nobody questions your morals or your ethics for playing on the PGA Tour, but playing for Saudi Arabia, all the live golf players, you're going to have to apologize and people are going to question your ethics. So they really played up this, it's wrong in principle, it's wrong morally speaking, that's why you should stay with us. Now, clearly it was sort of it was just a convenient argument for them at the time. They didn't actually believe that, because behind the scenes, apparently, there was a lot of negotiations going on with the live golf people. And that leads us to where we are today, where basically they're merging. So as of right now, when we're recording this, we don't know the particulars of how much control is the Saudi Public Investment Fund going to have, or MBS in particular, or Greg Norman, who was the CEO of Live Golf. How much control do they have versus how much control does Jay Monahan, the PGA Tour commissioner, have? This is all fresh and brand new. But one of the things we do know is that apparently the players on the PGA Tour, this was totally out of left field, and they are all stunned and shocked and pissed off.
Right.
So, because now, before you had a choice, do you want to play for the Saudi Arabian government or not? Now, there's no choice. Now you are going to be getting checks from the Saudi Arabian government. My guess is the amount of money that these golfers are about to be making is going to be triple what they're currently making. And by the way, it's not like they're making a little bit of money now. They're making colossal amounts of money. I mean, you have purses for events over $2 million to the winner for 4 days of work playing a golf tournament.
Right.
$2 million if you win. You're getting six figures, even if you're finishing, I don't even know, 25th, 20th, or whatever it is. So this is a huge deal. This is a massive change. And, look, you just, as somebody who is a golfer and somebody who's a golf fan, you hate to see it, because now there's this dark cloud hanging over everything around golf, not just the elitist concerns, but now the Saudi blood money soaked terms. And, a lot of big changes coming. I mean, I'm sure that the schedule next year is going to be totally revamped, because now you have to sort of merge the two. The PGA Tour had started raising their purses, looking at the amount of money that the live golfers were being paid. And then there's the question of you have all these players who were committed to the PGA Tour who turned down. Some people turned down. Tiger Woods was offered nearly $1 billion. He turned it down. You have all these other golfers, 100 million for this person or that person, 200 million for this person. They turned it down. And then now the PGA Tour is merging with live anyway. What's going to happen with the players who agreed to go? They got paid all that money, and now they're back on the PGA Tour anyway. So these people just left hundreds of millions of dollars sitting on the table. there's murmurs right now that maybe the people who went to Live Golf agreed to allow a fine against those players to sort of reduce their amount of money and maybe offer a gift to the PGA Tour players who didn't go.
Okay.
Like the details and the particulars have to be worked out. But this is like a colossal change in the world of golf, and it's not a good one.
And I want to give people a perspective. So I'm going to throw this up on the screen right now in terms of what Kyle was just referencing on how blindsided people were, because this is what apparently the PGA Tour was saying about the Live Golf Tour just like last year, right? So in this tweet here from Judd Legum, he says, in a lawsuit, the PGA Tour said that Live was offering golfers, quote, astronomical sums of money in an attempt to use the Live players and the game of golf to sports wash the recent history of Saudi atrocities. And today, of course, they're announcing that they're merging with Live. So, I mean, like, this is the ridiculous nature of this. I mean, obviously on this channel, I talk a lot about the atrocities of the Saudi Arabian government, their, genocide in Yemen and the US responsibility in that and all of that stuff. But like, there were players, as Kyle was just saying, who were kind of trying to take at least somewhat of a principled stance against going and taking these massive sums of money to go join the Live Golf Tour. And then now they're just being folded together anyways. And you have this like complete contradiction between what the PGA Tour was saying about Live when they were, antagonistic towards each other. And now apparently all of that just goes out the window, and none of that morality and that grandstanding matters at all in the face of a large amount of money for the PGA Tour for the rest of these players. I mean, it's just rank hypocrisy at the end of the day. So, following up on that, where do you think that this is going to go? Number one, with the players who, obviously, as you said, are kind of like pissed off right now. Number two, in terms of like where the sport goes from here, because it seems like to me, I mean, obviously, as you said, we don't have the exact makeup of, what type of control Saudi Arabia is going to have in this, the future of this. But like, where does this go as a sport that is potentially now going to be dominated with this money that's going explicitly to try to whitewash these, horrific crimes of the Saudi Arabian government?
Unfortunately, I think it's just going to become commonplace, right? Like people get used to, it's like the banality of evil, right? When we were 5 years into the Iraq war, you barely had anybody talking about the Iraq war on the news. It was just like, yeah, what's happening? That's just what it is. It's going to get to that point with Live Golf and with now Saudi Arabia basically owning all professional golf. I mean, the biggest change I see coming is literally just in terms of the amount of money the players are making and the schedule, like which tournaments get elevated, which ones don't. There's a big thing in the golf world. Live Golf came around and said, we don't do 4-day tournaments, we do 3-day tournaments. That was one of the reasons why a lot of these golfers wanted to go on top of the money, because they play less. They're going to have to merge. Like, do they have cuts in events on the PGA Tour? If you play 2 days and you're not in the top half of the field, you get cut and you make no money. Only the top half of the field gets money. Live Golf, everybody makes money. What are they going to do? Is it going to be all no-cut events? Is it going to be some cuts, some no cuts? Like, there's a lot of format things that need to be worked out. There's going to be now unity in the golf world in the sense that now there aren't two separate tours, so you're going to see all the best players in the world play against each other. But one of the arguments that the Live people made, which I found incredibly disingenuous, they would say like, oh, you guys are attacking us for taking this money, but, the PGA Tour, they have PGA Tour China, so they're doing business with the Chinese government, or they're, raising money from other Middle Eastern dictatorships. They might take investment money from some oil fund from some other Middle Eastern dictatorships. And, the response to that was always super fucking obvious. It was like, yeah, I don't agree with that either. I think we should stop that, right? But it's like, if you look at the totality, like the PGA Tour has problems, but it's not the problems that these overpaid elitist top-level golfer pricks think it is. Like Phil Mickelson helping and whining and moaning like he doesn't make enough money. Phil Mickelson is probably worth, before he even went there, he's probably worth like $80 million or $100 million. Nobody wants to see your...
And that was the other part of this, right? Is that, it's not as if like a lot of the players who were going over initially to give this sort of credibility to the Live Golf tournament, it's not as if they were like the equivalent of like, Division III golfers who were trying to like be upstarts or something like that. Like they were some of the, highest paid golfers in the game. They just wanted to take a little bit extra money from what they otherwise would have been able to get, right?
Yes, they had. Well, it was a kind of a mix. So they were able to pick off some of the highest level players, Live Golf was. But for every golfer they got that was sort of like in their prime peak level, it really was like a 5-to-1 ratio, and the other 5 are like brand new and totally untested but showing promise, or like 45 years or older and like, was super relevant back in the day, but it sort of, is over the hill. And so they just want to basically cash in. That's, I mean, it's ugly, man. It's gross. The problems with the PGA Tour, and I have no problem discussing the problems with the PGA Tour, because clearly I prefer the PGA Tour over Live Golf, although now there is no distinction. But the problems with the PGA Tour were, I think that the players should have gotten basically a salary. So if you get on the PGA Tour and you miss every cut because you have a bad year, I still think you should be given a base salary where you can survive, because some of the worst players on the tour, if they're in a slump, they could literally just go into debt having to travel all over the place. I think another problem with the PGA Tour is like they have volunteers at every tournament. I don't think they should be volunteer. I think they should be paid workers at the tournament, the people who basically, make the concession stand run and do all that other stuff. So there are problems with the PGA Tour, but they just pale in comparison to, like you said, a country that is literally doing a genocide in Yemen, hacked Jamal Khashoggi to pieces, and then lied to the world about it, behead people in the public square for sorcery and witchcraft and apostasy and all sorts of absurd things. So to see how they folded, really the main takeaway here is what we always talk about, right? This is capitalism.
Yeah.
This is the profit motive at work. And ironically, the PGA Tour was structured as sort of a nonprofit charity type thing, right? And so now, it's not like they weren't making tremendous salaries, the people at the top, the management, Jay Monahan, et cetera. But like now, there is no playing hide the ball with what the real intentions are and what you're really in this for. And clearly, this is a for-profit venture. Clearly, if there's enough money involved, they're going to fold. And that's exactly what they did. And it goes to show you there is no moral core. There is no, ethical lens to this. And I was talking to Crystal about this earlier, and I don't know if this is a controversial opinion. I don't know if I'm wrong on this. I haven't really thought through it too much. But instinctually, something in me says, I don't know why foreign governments should be allowed to come into the United States and buy up entire industries.
Right.
Because that's what this is, right?
Yeah.
A foreign government. Imagine Vladimir Putin of Russia decided, I'm going to buy all of U.S. steel. If he decided that tomorrow, I think there'd be a little bit of an outcry. And I think people would be like, hey, maybe we shouldn't allow this. Maybe, this should be something in the law where they can't own over a certain percentage of it, if own any of it at all. And this isn't even just like a foreign individual buying something. It is the government of Saudi Arabia buying all of professional golf. So, I mean, honestly, I'm at the point, I don't even think it should be allowed. And I feel bad for the players like Rory McIlroy, who is sort of leading the charge against this and making an argument on moral terms. I feel bad there's a Golf Channel host by the name of Brandel Chambly and another one by the name of Eamon Lynch, who, I mean, his commentary on this has been pretty based all along. It's kind of sounded similar to you or me talking about it. Like, hey, this is sports washing. They're just trying to whitewash their atrocities. They're just trying to buy themselves a good name. And now, like, the guy works for the Golf Channel. The Golf Channel has close relations to the PGA Tour. Now, are they going to fire him, or is he going to have to quit because now he's one of his bosses is effectively the government of Saudi Arabia?
Or how do you even go about addressing that in that kind of a context, right? If you are somebody who gives a single solitary shit about human rights, and you are a commentator on this, or you work in some way with the PGA Tour, are you just like not supposed to talk about it at all? Or is it something you're just going to downplay and sort of assist in the whitewashing of it? I mean, it's like, it's an incredibly difficult situation that a lot of those guys are going to be in.
Yeah, there's no way out for a guy like that, right? Because if he continues to speak his mind, he would continue to say this is corrupt. Saudi Arabia is just whitewashing their atrocities, etc. But, now when it's all under one umbrella, I'm sure the PGA Tour is going to also want everybody to be hush-hush with their criticisms when it comes to Saudi Arabia, because now they're making a tremendous amount of money from Saudi Arabia. So it's just ugly, man. It's just gross. I don't like. It's bad enough that you have these mega corporations that basically funded the PGA Tour before with the charitable money they would give for the purses, and it's like, gross. You got whatever, JP Morgan Chase or some insurance company that's funding the golfers. And that's gross enough, but I understand, like, this is the nature of business. It's how it works. At least it's not like some State Farm or something is massacring people, right? But now when you get to this level where it's Saudi Arabia, like literally one of the worst governments on planet Earth, as a golfer, it's just sickening to me. It's just absolutely sickening knowing that all these golfers that like kids look up to, they're all going to get their paycheck signed from like the worst government on the planet. It's just gross.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, again, just to hammer home that point that you made earlier, this is just capitalism, right? It's not some like individual evil executive at the PGA Tour who has sympathies with the Saudis or something. It's just capitalism.
Yep.
It's just money. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I don't know, is the PGA Tour, is it now a private organization, or do they have shareholders or anything like that?
So now all of that is going to change now.
Right.
Before
So
they
it's
were
going
a
to change.
charitable organization.
Okay.
Now, I mean, it has to, right? I mean,
Yeah.
all of this is going to be worked out. Maybe they've already been working on it behind the scenes, agreeing in principle to some basic structural stuff. But I can't foresee any deal being okay, because even if, let's say, for argument's sake, the structure of the PGA Tour stays the exact same, but now Saudi Arabia comes in and says, we're going to buy 49% of the PGA Tour. So we'll be a minority owner, but we're going to, fund it 49%. At the end result, they're still doing it for the same goddamn reason, which is we want to buy legitimacy, and we want to whitewash our atrocities, and everybody's just okay with it. And now any peeps, anybody who's making a peep, making a moral argument now they're, it's over, right? Like there is going to be none of that moving forward.
Yeah.
And just sick. I mean, I've gotten into a little bit of a habit. I'm not much of a Twitter warrior these days. That was for a long time ago, but I do from time to time troll the Live Golf Stan accounts. I'm convinced they're all bots, bro.
Yeah.
Like if you look at the numbers for Live Golf in terms of how many people watch it, they stopped publishing them after a while because they were like,
really
embarrassing. They started on YouTube. Then they made a deal with the CW, which is like a third-rate network, but it was the only network that would give them a deal. They weren't getting a lot of eyeballs, so they were failing in the marketplace. But the fact of the matter is, when you're dealing with a foreign government with billions of dollars, basically an unlimited amount of money, they just weren't going to go away. They don't care if they were losing money year after year. They were just going to keep existing. And how do you compete against somebody who's just going to keep existing? They saw green and they said, let's just go ahead and make that deal, and everybody will be better off for it, they thought. So, but I'm happy with the fact that there's a lot of PGA Tour players who are apparently super pissed off, because the other part of this is there's a player advisory board. In theory, the PGA Tour is supposed to be player run also. And you have top 10 players in the world who learned about this on Twitter.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It was announced on Twitter. It's psychotic.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. For sure, obviously, again, you feel for those individual players who did care about this. But, again, this is the nature of how this system works. And it's not even just in the golf world as well. I mean, we've seen the Saudis try to go after players like Lionel Messi and, Ronaldo's organization that he plays for. And I'm pretty sure they're into like, some of the Formula One racing as well. And they're getting into that world. WWE, right? They're trying to get their claws into any aspect of sort of the culture or the sports world that they can to try to normalize their presence on the global stage. And then you also have, outside of the cultural aspect of this and outside of the sports world aspect of this, you also have just the role of the US government in perpetuating this. I mean, we could have taken a stand as Joe Biden promised that he was going to do back in 2020 when he was on the Democratic debate stage and said, we're going to make Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, into a pariah state, and we are going to treat them as the brutal dictatorship that they are. And then he gets into office, and then nothing is actually done about that. We continue to sell them weapons. We continue to whitewash the genocide in Yemen. I mean, if anything, we've been a blockade in trying to end the situation in Yemen. I mean, we've been in the way of some of the negotiated peace settlements that have been on the table in that situation over with Saudi Arabia and Yemen and the Houthi rebels. And, on top of that, I mean, this is something I've talked about a lot on my channel is, you look at somebody just in terms of the rotating door within DC politics and the influence of the military industrial complex. You have somebody like Lloyd Austin, who was appointed to be the head of the Pentagon under Joe Biden. This man just came from being on the board of Raytheon, where he got like $1 million payout when he was leaving. One of the first weapon sales that the Biden administration approved was for, guess what, Raytheon to Saudis. So I mean, it's like it's just such a corrupt circle jerk that we're talking about here, and you can see it at the levels of the U.S. government. You can see it at the levels of corporations and obviously even organizations like the PGA Tour, which apparently was a nonprofit. And I mean, just see it at all of these different levels that are perpetuating this cycle of violence and authoritarianism from the same country that also wants to pretend to be like the beacon for freedom and democracy on the world stage.
Yeah, to your point, I mean, I remember Dick Cheney and Halliburton, right? That was a huge story. he took an exit bonus from Halliburton, and then he becomes vice president. He's one of the biggest cheerleaders for war with Iraq, a country that didn't attack us. We sell weapons to 73% of the world's dictatorships. And one of the things I've been thinking about ever since we heard this news is what happens if a president now decides to actually do the right thing, unwind our relationship with Saudi Arabia, become more energy independent, and sort of make it so that we don't need them anymore, gets back in the Iran deal, which Biden should have done. He said he was going to do. What happens now if a president does that? Are you going to have, like, now the PGA Tour is going to lobby on behalf of their business partner, the Saudi Arabian government? Is that where we are? They're so intertwined and intertangled in our business affairs here that basically any good faith attempt from a president or anybody with a position of power is not enough to override the power of green. I mean, it's astonishing and it's terrible. And, you know, people, one of my positions, which is for whatever reason, not as popular online as I think it should be, is I'm a big advocate of protectionism over free trade. And this is just such a great example of, like, why would you let them get their tentacles into this country and into our business interests just as much as they are, when you know there are long-term ramifications that marry us to this horrifically brutal government? And it's because they don't care about the humanitarian concerns. It was never about the humanitarian concerns. They're only going to highlight the atrocities of a regime if that regime is already on the official U.S. baddie list because they don't want to do business with our corporations.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, that's literally what it comes down to at the end of the day. I mean, obviously, you know, these corporations, I couldn't expect them to give a shit about any of these principles or anything like that. But yeah, when it comes to the public sector, when it comes to the U.S. government, you would think that if we actually had a functioning representative democracy, this would be the kind of thing where they would step in and say, okay, maybe we don't want that undue influence. I mean, we see this with, you know, other countries like Israel, for example, that has massive lobbying, arms at their disposal to influence U.S. politicians, to buy off U.S. politicians. And, you know, this is just something that is going to continue to perpetuate itself. And now even more so with Saudi Arabia, even putting aside the influences of, you know, for-profit weapons manufacturers that profit off of selling them weapons and all of that. This is just taking it to an entirely different level. So, with that being said, Kyle, appreciate you coming on the channel, giving us the breakdown in the golf world. And, this is an absolutely insane story, honestly. I mean, it's not too unexpected given where the United States is at right now, but it's absolutely wild. So thanks for coming on, man.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. And like I said, I'm really looking forward to this. This is not a story that's just going to be limited to like the ESPN world or the Golf Channel or Golf Twitter. This is bigger than that. This is a CNN story. This is anybody can look at this and realize it's a big deal, because it is.
Right. Absolutely. As it should be.
Everyone is saying good Politic guy has the best politics. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying